Good evening, everyone. The Durham Public Schools Board of Education work session is now in session. At this time, we wish to extend a warm welcome to everyone who is joining us this evening. The purpose of this meeting is to inform our parents, staff, and constituents about the work aligned with our mission to embrace, educate, and empower every student to innovate, serve, and lead. The interpreters for tonight, Martha Romo Gillis and Marty Ramirez. Thank you for taking the time to join us. We will now have a moment of silence. I hope that we can take this time to remember all the men and women who fought for our right to vote and remember to execute our right to vote this month. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is agenda review and approval.
Ms. Rogers, I would like to add one item to our agenda. And that is going to be the superintendent evaluation form. I just want to talk a little bit about the process that we use for the evaluation. So we can add that it can be the last item. It can be before we go to summary of follow-up items.
Second.
It's been moved and properly. Did you?
I didn't.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but I can move it.
Move approval of the agenda as amended. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It passes unanimously. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the board work session minutes. From October 6th, 2022.
I had a couple of small edits. One was on page 4. Sorry, I don't have my notes right in front of me. I believe it's on page 4. There's a word, it was effects, and it should be effects with an A. On page 5, it said, and I can point this out, but at the top of page 5, it said it was just the wrong tense of the word began. And then I wanted to add to the things that we kind of concluded about the LGBTQ plus discussion, the task force, just add that to the numbers, the list of items.
Thank you.
I would move approval of the minutes from October 6th with those amendments.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor,
Aye.
say aye.
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 That passes unanimously. We will now move into our general public comment. So the public comment rules, a quick review of the rules. First, state your name if speaking for an organization. State the name of the organization as well. Second, speakers are asked to present their comments in a specified time. Tonight, it will be 3 minutes. When the yellow light comes on, you have 1 minute left to start winding up your remarks. When the red light comes on, it will beep, which indicates your time is up. Complaints about named staff, students, or parents should not be voiced in open session. However, we are very interested in hearing your concerns with regard to public education, safety of students, or to the operation of the school system. Finally, the board members will listen carefully and consider the comments, but we do not engage in a discussion with the speakers. Our first speaker is Hillary McKenzie, to be followed by Kumar Sathi.
Good evening, Chair Umstead, Vice Chair Sears, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening. My name is Hillary McKenzie, and I'm here tonight because DPS parents asked me to briefly share my experience as a former school board member in Orange County Schools. I was chair of the board and of the board's policy committee when gender support guidelines were formally adopted to the district's policy manual in 2021. I don't believe that I need to stand up here and convince you that transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary people exist in DPS and that they're worthy of protections. I'm confident that you're familiar with the data surrounding the mental health of our LGBTQ plus students and how incredibly important it is for people to be addressed by their names and pronouns. How student success is so closely tied to a sense of safety and belonging in school. As a school board, you are the policy owners of Durham Public Schools. Along with hiring and evaluating the superintendent and overseeing the budget, your main responsibility is to determine the culture of the district by writing and maintaining all of its policies. For better or worse, your actions and inactions signal to every staff member and student exactly what is acceptable, who is valued, and what behavior will be tolerated. We unfortunately cannot rely on the good intentions of people. Superintendents, administrators, and staff members turn over. Laws and policies exist because people deserve clear and consistent expectations with clear and consistent consequences. When a law or policy does not exist, its absence sends just as clear a message. When the Orange County School Board passed gender support guidelines, it came directly from the board's policy committee where it had been workshopped for several months, and it was unanimously adopted at a board meeting in open session. It is a procedural policy that is embedded in the non-discrimination policy. Because it is an adopted policy, it is and will be printed for families and staff every year. It is searchable in the OCS online policy manual, and failure to comply with it results in consequences for both students and staff members in the same way as any other district policy. It has empowered staff members and protected students. It's a shield for administrators and teachers in an unhinged political environment. It provides a safe landing space for parents who are trying to help support their children. It tells employees that they are safe to be themselves and safe to provide relevant curriculum to their students. It lets volunteers know that they are only welcome in schools if they treat every person with respect. It signals to students that the people elected to serve them truly value their identities. Thank you so much for taking this task seriously and for continuing to work towards a policy that will truly protect the students you serve and the people you employ. If I can be of assistance in any way, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Kumar Sathi. My opinions represent my own thoughts and not that of my employer. Good evening, and thank you for supporting our public schools. My name is Kumar Sathi. I'm the District Equity Facilitator for Orange County Schools. But I'm also a former Durham Public Schools teacher, having taught at Pearsontown, Rogershur, and Easley. I'm here today to speak about the value and necessity of gender support guidelines and policy from a teacher's perspective. I was a 5th grade teacher until I officially transitioned to my new central office role this week. Knowing that our Orange County School Board not only discussed, but created policy around gender support made it easier to support my students and to feel protected when I had conversations that were designed to keep students safe. When it comes to tough topics and controversial issues that should honestly not be controversial, it is important for teachers and school staff to feel the weight of the institution behind them, protecting them when they do what is best for students. Having guidelines and the rationale for such gender support guidelines circulated to school personnel as official documents and printed in student handbooks goes a long way toward ensuring that the act of protecting students is not performative. It is imperative. Having clear guidelines helped me as a teacher know when my role and that of my colleagues in preventing students from experiencing harm due to misgendering or anti-LGBTQ plus comments were occurring. This role and responsibility to protect students should not be ambiguous. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Heather Redding, followed by Harley Cooper.
Good evening. My name is Heather Redding, and I'm a parent with children in the Orange County school system. I'm here this evening to speak to the value that the Orange County Gender Support Guidelines have provided to the students, families, staff, and teachers in our schools, and to urge Durham Public Schools to implement similar guidelines. You might wonder why a parent from another county would be speaking to you all as this evening, but I have watched as homophobic and transphobic bigotry has manifested more and more boldly in political campaigns, among policymakers, in community groups, on the streets, and all of it transcends county borders. For children to thrive and participate in a diverse society, we must normalize diversity and inclusivity in our schools, our homes, and everyday society. Not only is this policy good for LGBTQIA students, but it is important for cis-identifying students and staff members as well. Sadly, it is not normalizing itself. I'm proud that Orange County Schools took formal steps to protect its students and staff, but that's just the start. One public school system is not enough to normalize inclusivity and gender justice. We must continue to fight for the rights of students across the gender spectrum to be treated with the dignity and protections they deserve. Furthermore, the physical and emotional health of LGBTQI students is at stake when systems fail to see, acknowledge, and support them. As a former academic, I would be remiss if I didn't mention just one citation, one piece of research. A 2022 article in the North Carolina Medical Journal cites the Campaign for Southern Equality in Asheville, which reported high rates of suicidal ideation among Black transgender folks than others they surveyed, with an especially high rate among Black non-binary respondents. However, the author reports that transgender and non-binary youth whose preferred pronouns are respected by those they live with have rates of suicide attempts that are half that of those whose pronouns are not respected by those they live with. It is therefore critical that schools pass guidelines and policies that not only acknowledge transgender and gender nonconforming students, but support them as human beings by respecting their preferred pronouns and names, by providing with a safe environment to learn and grow, and by normalizing the diverse spectrum of gender identities that have always been present in human society. In short, all children benefit when all children are seen and feel safe. Doing nothing to protect these students is not an acceptable stance, and it validates the white Christian heteronormativity that many groups are trying to bring back. This past weekend, I personally have witnessed 20 Proud Boys and white Christian nationalists scream and verbally attack children and their families attending a private drag brunch. The level of anti-LGBTQ rhetoric and hate in communities is very palpable and very real right now, and it will not fix itself. I ask that you prioritize the implementation of gender support guidelines and openly disavow the hateful speech coming from groups like Moms for Liberty and See Values Coalition and Education First Alliance, all whom pose a clear threat to LGBTQ students and our larger society. Thank you.
Harley Cooper.
My name is Harley Cooper. I'm a 21-year-old bisexual transgender man, and I attended a DPS middle school in the 2010s. During my time at this middle school, I didn't know that I was trans, but I'd already begun dressing in a more masculine way, which painted a target on my back. As far as my classmates were concerned, I was a lesbian, and thus the harassment began. On a near daily basis, from grades 6 through 8, I was laughed at, teased, talked about behind my back, asked probing questions about my sexuality, and on one occasion shoved. Every day I was constantly on edge because if I did something that could be used to make fun of me, it would be. My classmates acted entitled to information about my sexuality and would corner me and bombard me with questions. Eventually, I admitted to being bisexual, which just prompted more harassment. I wasn't even safe on the bus. People would film me just sitting in my seat and talking to my friends. On the occasions that I stood up for myself, I got called crazy or a bitch and mocked further. Whenever I went to the counselor, she would just tell me to ignore them. If they found out I'd talked to her, I would get called a snitch. Only one teacher in the entire school ever made an effort to help me. Most teachers would look the other way. One 7th grade teacher yelled at me and another LGBT student in front of the entire class for something we didn't even do, knowing that she was giving our bullies ammunition. Reminding myself that one day this experience would end helped me get through it, so it was fairly jarring when I left middle school with depression and PTSD. I had flashbacks throughout high school during the day, and I continue to have frequent nightmares. We were required to watch anti-bullying documentaries every year. The people who bullied me understood what they were doing and how it would affect me. However, They were still children and couldn't fully comprehend the consequences of their actions. The adults, on the other hand, had the authority and common sense to understand what was going on and do something about it. Almost all of them chose not to. I wasn't the only queer kid to leave a DPS school depressed and traumatized, and if nothing changes, I won't be the last. Thank you.
Thank you. Jackie Turnwald, Carmel Baran Matalon.
Hey, good evening. My name is Jack Turnwald. My pronouns are they, them. I was a DPS employee, educator for 12 years. I'm here tonight to speak as well on the gender support guidelines. First, I want to thank you all for the conversations I know you've been having and the work that you've been investing in moving forward on this. There were a couple of things I wanted to highlight tonight from a teacher's perspective. So today I went on the DPS application and was just kind of checking out how things look there. And when you go to the honorifics to make an application, you have the options of Miss, Mr., Mrs., Doctor, lots of different things, but there's not the non-binary honorific, which is mix, MX. And I wanted to suggest that that be looked at. Additionally, where it asks for gender, you have the options of male, female, X, or prefer not to answer. My gender is not X, and I'm happy to share that I'm non-binary if I'm given the opportunity. And it's actually an excellent data point for DPS to have. And when we look at things like this, if an educator coming into this environment is seeing that we don't have an inclusive application, what makes them believe that the school will also be inclusive or the district will also be inclusive? And we've talked before about how teachers' working conditions are students' learning conditions. And for queer students who need representation, this is an opportunity to help create that pipeline. Additionally, I recently moved. Not sure that people know, I no longer live in Durham. And I moved to a town in Wake County that is far less diverse and far less inclusive, unfortunately. So there's a lot of work to do there. I've been working at the polls this week as a poll greeter. And when I say there has been angry people yelling at Ruby Bridges vibes, it's kind of scary. When I think about Durham, Durham is a place that was inclusive for me and that I got the opportunity to grow a lot from this community. And I know changes like this are hard because you get a lot of pushback from people who are very vocal. But I want to remind you that this community is actually far more inclusive than most. And there are more people who want to come to the table and do this work with you than not. And that's an opportunity to lead for other districts who have much more jarring circumstances. Thank you so much.
Heyo, my name is Carmel and my pronouns are they, them. I'm a boy and a girl. My teachers need training so they can support me. If another kid says that I can be both a boy and a girl, that's bullying. But if my teachers don't know that, then they can't help me. Please send all the teachers in Durham to good training. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tal Matalan, followed by Ron Baran.
Hey, y'all. Good evening, and thank you for having us here again. My name is Tal Matalon. I'm a DPS parent and a teacher. I was here last month and shared my experiences both as the parents of a gender nonconforming kindergarten student and as an educator in all grade levels in DPS. You heard many of us, family members, educators, former students, members of the broader community, and we heard you respond and say many things that made me feel encouraged leaving here. You spoke of a task force and of immediate steps. You spoke of urgency that you understood exists. You spoke of clear policy and training. And I come back today disappointed. The immediate steps we asked for were already overdue. They become more so each and every day. Students, teachers, staff, and other community members are being bullied, intimidated, and invalidated in our schools. Those of us who want to provide support need the clear guidelines to do so. Those who bully, intimidate, and invalidate members of our community need to hear the clear message that their actions are not acceptable. We need you to have taken action months ago, and we need you to do so now. Thank you very much.
My name is Ron Baron, and I'm proud to be Carmel's father. After my prior email, one of my kids' teachers came up to me and thanked us for lighting that, for being there to support Carmel. And she said, you know, we love Carmel. We want to support Carmel, and we need the training and support from the district. LGBTQIA and GNC students and staff need support now. They need training in how to support our students now. They need to know that it is safe to speak up and advocate for their students and themselves now. Administrators need training in teacher support and dealing with backlash from parents now. We need district-wide policy on gender that is clear, universal, and enforceable now. I'm not one to mince words. The ongoing delay in stalling on this board is doing active harm. We don't even have a timeline to set policy. This board is highly capable, progressive, and experienced. This board can choose to act with the urgency students deserve, and it damn well should. Thank you.
Next, we have Amy Scuria, followed by Ann. Ann.
Good evening, members of the board. I want to thank you for all that you do to create a positive and meaningful educational experience for Durham students. My name is Amy Scuria. I'm a professional, let me take this off. I'm a professional composer, a mom, a spouse, a previous avid homeschooler, and now a proud mother of a DPS student. I've shared with you the standard identities to which most people relate. What I don't often share, but what feels imperative to impart this evening, is that despite what you think or might think from looking at me, I am gender fluid. What this means is that despite the fact that most days I present pretty strongly as a woman, some days I feel like a man, some days I feel like a woman, a lot of days I feel like a mishmash of everything in between. I was well into my 30s by the time I embraced this aspect of my identity. And the road to reaching the level of self-love that we all deserve to possess was paved with years of self-loathing, confusion, and feeling completely and utterly like an outsider. Especially on days when I learned how to play the female role quite convincingly. This level of masquerading led me into depression, anxiety, isolation, and I'll be quite blunt, too many suicidal thoughts. I stand before you today to make the argument around why it is so important that we teach our children and the staff teaching our children about gender diversity, at the very least. None of us are deaf to the arguments that are being made in our current climate, that somehow teaching our children about gender diversity is sexualizing our children. If I impart nothing else to you, please let me impart this. Gender and sexuality are completely separate aspects of humanity. Gender identity has nothing to do with sexuality. Sex education is equally important, definitely. But teaching younger children about gender differences is not sexualizing them. Nearly 50% of LGBTQ youth considered suicide in the past year. 73% of LGBTQ youth experience anxiety. 58% experience depression. Nearly 30% have experienced homelessness and/or housing insecurity. It only takes one educator to significantly reduce these numbers. It takes one affirming adult that would make all the difference for these youth. Imagine all of the staff at DPS. These precious and valuable members of our community, too many of them will not receive the support that they need at home. Too many of them will be shunned too often in their lives. I know from personal experience. DPS board, you have the power to change that. These precious youth deserve nothing less. Thank you.
Hi, y'all. My name is Anne Sakawi Hemstreet. My pronouns are they or she. I am a queer parent of 2 young children and live in Durham with my wife and children. You've heard from me enough to know what I expect of the schools in my community, so I'm going to keep my comment brief. We were all hoping to come today to hear a timeline. We're really disappointed that there's still not a timeline for a policy for getting our kids the help they need right now, so that they are no longer being discriminated against and harmed right now. These supports should have been in place yesterday for all students to be safe and thrive. The other thing that I want to point out is you don't need a task force to know what needs to go into this policy. You need a task force to help implement and enforce the policy, but you have model policies, you've received model policies, you've received texts and articles from all of the people here tonight and from other people for months what needs to go into a policy. You know what needs to go into the policy. What you're not sure about is how to implement and enforce this policy. So I encourage you to act now and then work with the task force to figure out how to do that in the district. On another note, many of you have expressed a desire to learn more. I am the director of Rainbow Collective for Change. I partner with the Durham County Library on Rainbow Story Times. We do what we're asking you to do in the district, in the community, because you're not doing it in the district. Me and the library are going to be doing a story time on Saturday, November 12th at 11 a.m. at the main branch library. I encourage all of you to come and listen to Read a Crayon Story by Michael Hall. And we'll be doing a lesson that's a welcoming schools lesson. Both of these are things that we are recommending you do in 1st and 2nd grade. And I encourage you to come see what it looks like to role model pronoun use, see what it looks like to talk about gender identity and expression with young children. You will have an opportunity to learn, and I'm encouraging you to join us there. Thank you for your time.
Unless others have arrived, we have final speaker, Dean Fitzgerald.
My name is Dean Fitzgerald. I'm here representing myself. I'm a parent of a kindergarten student in a DPS school. I thank the board for continuing this conversation with parents. However, action must be taken sooner rather than later. I would like to say a few words tonight about my family and luck. Other parents of gender non-conforming kids have told me that my family is lucky that my child was accepted to the magnet school that she attends. We are lucky that school has a gender-affirming principal and administrative staff. We are lucky that her kindergarten teacher's response to learning of my child's pronouns was, quote, "Which bathroom would she like to use?" My family is lucky that our child's gender is wholly unremarkable to those that teach and care for her throughout the school day. I am not satisfied that my family gets this support because we are lucky and other kids in the district don't because they are not. This should be the standard, and it can be with the resources at the disposal of this board. Any further delay in implementing district-wide LGBTQIA+ support training, and policies means that you are subjecting more kids who need support to the whims of luck and chance. And I believe one of the purposes of public education is to eliminate those disparities in all forms. Thank you for your time.
I thank everybody for coming. We don't typically respond to public comment, but we do want you all to know that we're working on implementing policy, passing policy, and developing a task force as the board has affirmed in previous board meetings and work sessions. But thank you all for being here. Okay. We're now moving on to our next agenda item, which is academic services priority 1 update. Dr. Hardy.
Thank you so much, Board Member Rogers, Chair Umstead, Vice Chair Sears, Dr. Mabenga, and other board members. I think we have some staff in the hall. If they could come in and if we can pull up the presentation. Priority 1 presentation. Although we are looking forward to school improvement plans. Thank you so much. I would also like to take this moment to acknowledge and thank Dr. Stacy D. Stewart. She serves as Chief of Schools and also serves as the co-priority lead for Priority 1. Next slide, please. Tonight, you will hear an update about our strategic plan, Priority 1, Increase Academic Achievement. The presentation will include updates for each goal, as well as some of our key accomplishments. We will discuss district strategies, and later this evening, you will hear about those specific school strategies from Dr. Stewart's presentation on our school improvement planning process and school improvement plans. We will share our team members and spend time reviewing each goal, strategies, and key accomplishments. I would like to recognize our priority members. If you could please stand when your name is called. Our leads include Dr. Linda Tagorian, Interim Executive Director for K-12 Curriculum and Instruction, Ashley Stevens, Director of School Innovation, Dr. Laverne Maddox Perry, Senior Executive Director, Student Support Services, Dr. Kelvin Booglet, Executive Director of Equity Affairs and Professional Learning, Dr. Julie Pack, Executive Director for Career and Technical Education and Magnet Programs, Ms. Joy Malone, Executive Director for Information Technology. In addition to these goal team leads, as well as the members that you see on your slide, please note this is the work that occurs greatly in our schools, and we have lots of collaboration and have gathered input from teachers, as well as teacher leaders that serve on staff, our superintendent teachers advisory council, our counselors, our graduation work group, social workers, as well as our school-based coaches, teaching and learning coaches, and other content coaches. Next slide, please. You'll go forward one more. This slide shows a summary of the goals that we have for Priority 1. The first goal is that at least 90% of our schools will meet or exceed standards. Our benchmark for the 22 school year was 87%, and we were just shy of that at 86.5%. The next goal is that at least 60% of our students will achieve grade level proficiency. Our benchmark for the 22 school year was 57%, and we were at 44%. This is an 11% increase from the previous academic year. The next goal is that DPS 4-year graduation rate will be at 90%. Our benchmark for the 21-22 academic year was 88.4, and we were at 84%. And the last goal is that 100% of our teachers, leaders, and staff will use technology as a tool for accelerating and personalizing learning. Our benchmark was 80%, and we surpassed it at 87%. In our presentation this evening, we will look at these goals more closely and discuss the strategies that we have implemented to address the impacts of the pandemic and accelerate student achievement. At this time, I will pass the presentation over to our interim executive director for K-12 curriculum and instruction, Dr. Linda Tagoran. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Dr. Hardy. Priority 1A, next slide, please. Priority 1A of our strategic plan focuses on our goal of having at least 90% of our schools meet or exceed academic growth as measured by EVOS. This includes efforts to mobilize our teaching and learning coaches to use data to strategically inform and improve instruction in our schools. It also focuses on culturally responsive coaching and professional development for teachers, coaches, and instructional leaders. As part of this work, we have strived to increase access to robust career pathways for all students. Additionally, we seek to improve access to and use of technological devices to create blended learning opportunities for all students. Next slide, please. As you can see in this slide, we are making progress toward our goal of having 90% of our schools meet or exceed academic growth. Next slide. I'm going to highlight some of our key accomplishments related to Priority 1A. In an effort to maximize the impact of our professional development, the content of our Coaches Instructional Leadership Academy has been tightly aligned with the curricular focus of principal meetings. This year, we have also implemented a new core curriculum resource, Reveal Math, in 612 Math. We now have core curriculum resources in K-12 Math, K-12 ELA, K-12 Science, and K-12 Social Studies, and are providing teacher professional development to support all of these areas. We have also implemented a Content Learning Institute to build the capacity of our coaches to lead professional development to support the core curriculum resources. We are now partnering more effectively across departments to strategically use data to change outcomes for all students and to build effective intervention plans to impact student success. And beginning this fall, Curriculum Instruction has revised its service model to build content knowledge in teachers and support cross-district and school-based professional learning communities. Next slide, please. Priority 1B focuses on making sure at least 60% of all DPS students achieve grade level proficiency as measured by the end of grade and end of course testing. The strategies include efforts that relate to core curriculum content, academic interventions, and the strategic use of data to inform instructional practices. Next slide, please. As you can see in this slide, we are recovering from the disruption associated with the pandemic, but are making progress toward the goal of 60% proficiency. Next slide. This slide highlights our key accomplishments related to Priority 1B. As noted in the discussion on Priority 1A, we have adopted a new core curriculum resource in 612 Math. We are rolling out a new panorama data dashboard that will provide quick access to data for students in a one-stop shop for teachers and school and district leaders. We will install a new public-facing Hanover data dashboard that will provide public access to data and improve in transparency and accountability. MTSS is revising its standard treatment protocol and MTSS supports as part of a cross-district collaboration to improve outcomes for students receiving Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. And at this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Dr. Laverne Maddox-Perry, who will discuss Priority 1C.
Thank you, Dr. Tadarian. Good evening. The information on this slide is familiar to many, but we've added it as a reminder. Is it next slide, please? Yes, 1C, thank you. The information on this slide is familiar to many, but we've added it as a reminder of the 5 strategies to achieving Goal 1C. Goal 1C utilizes innovative methods and time-tested best practices to increase our cohort graduation rate to at least 90%. Next slide, please. A review of the 4-year data trend since the inception of our strategic plan reveals steady increases in our cohort graduation rate and yearly meeting our benchmark goals, with a dip below our benchmark in 2021-2022, our first full year of in-person learning following interrupted schooling. We recognize that both societal and institutional impacts contributed to the 84% cohort graduation rate after an historic high of 87% in 2020-2021, just a year before. In addition to looking at the overall cohort graduation rate, we also look closely at how students categorized in specific subgroups have experienced both inclines or declines in graduation rate. Each year, and with a laser-like focus this final year of our strategic plan, our interdepartmental collaboration continues to adapt our approaches and innovation. The collaborative group, including all of academic services, but specifically the Office of Equity and Professional Learning, Student Support Services, Exceptional Children's, Career and Technical Education, and our English Learner Services Department, continue to engage in problem-solving data analysis with triangulation with our current student achievement data, student climate survey data, and social emotional learning screeners as indicators of where our students are, how they have expressed their needs or demonstrated their unique needs, and as the guide for our continued collaboration. Next slide, please. For 4 years, we have worked diligently with tangible results to increase our cohort graduation rate and still recognize there is much more to do in this area. As we are now in the final year of Goal C, we wanted to highlight accomplishments correlated to each strategy as a snapshot of the work into accelerating students and their matriculation to graduation. Strategy 1, identify barriers to graduation for Black males and Hispanic males and females. We recognize that academic performance, social and emotional development, as well as school attendance, are factors, particularly in the early grades, and predictors of a student's matriculation towards graduation. We are currently increasing our strategies to address this identification of barriers. Strategy 2, develop a centralized early warning tracking system beginning at elementary school that identifies students who are at risk of disconnecting from school. Through a collaborative effort and the support of our superintendent and school board, thank you, we are excited about the current implementation planning for our data dashboard to launch prior to the start of second semester. Our data dashboard will include a feature called Student Success. This feature of the dashboard allows Durham Public Schools to customize the data to be included in a one-stop shop for data analysis, progress monitoring, intervention planning, and yes, an early warning system for early intervention when students exhibit signs of academic, behavioral, or social emotional risk. Our teachers, administrators, and district leaders will now have direct access to data indicative of student performance to use to improve our instruction, prevention, and support for each student. Strategy 3, implement system structures and processes related to students and staffing to dismantle the barriers we've identified to graduation. In addition to the actions taken in previous years, we are now strategizing ways to expand, for instance, Evening Academy. We're increasing our creative daytime scheduling and other non-conventional methods of providing credit recovery options. In addition to an early fall start for Evening Academy, the expansion will include additional sites and additional instructional support staff to increase the equitable access. Our high school leaders are determining how best to allocate these fiscal and human resources to better assist our undercredited, overage students in achieving on cohort graduation. Strategy 4, ensure every student develops a 4-year plan upon entry into high school. By partnering with our Career and Technical Education Department, we are expanding career and college readiness using digital tools as well as more traditional academic advising like the Minute Meetings. Minute meetings are utilized by school counselors to ensure multiple, more frequent one-to-one contact with students. These meetings can target a specific area like college admission processes, available internships, or other career options for students while also building relationships. And lastly, strategy 5, increase the number of career and technical education completers in all high schools. Our awareness efforts have progressed to moderate increases in the number of students considering CTE pathways, as well as those who have made gains toward pathway completion. Schools are engaging in deliberate two-way communication and conversations with parents and guardians earlier in a student's career to make sure they are informed about best fit options for their students. As we engage in the final year push for 90% cohort graduation rate, DPS has had a number of accomplishments that are evidence that the goal, 90% cohort graduation rate, is not only attainable, but also likely if we continue along our current trajectory. At this time, I'd like to introduce Ms. Joy Malone to speak to Priority 1D.
Good evening. Priority 1D is to ensure that all staff use technology as a tool to accelerate and personalize learning for all students. The strategies in this goal are directly aligned to the North Carolina Digital Learning Progress Rubric for Schools, which is a planning tool intended to support North Carolina's educators, schools, districts, and communities in the transition to digital age teaching and learning. The components of this rubric include the goals of the priority. Number 1, professional development and learning. Number 2, leadership. Number 3, content and instruction. Number 4, technology, infrastructure, and devices. And number 5, data and assessment. Next slide, please. The data dashboard for Goal 1D brings to light significant progress in technology adoption. Our ongoing work will continue to focus on professional learning, strategic strategy 2, as well as ongoing improvement in instruction through our learning management system, Canvas, strategy 4. We also continue to have ongoing focus on sustainability and technology use. According to our data dashboard, we were able to meet and exceed the yearly benchmark. This indicates that as of last spring, 87% of our teaching staff were regularly utilizing technology to personalize and accelerate instruction. We will do a final survey this spring and anticipate meeting our 2023 benchmark of 100%. Next slide, please. As part of Goal 1D, Durham Public Schools has invested in Canvas as our learning management system for all teachers, students, staff, and parent observers. During our implementation of Canvas, we have developed K-12 teaching and learning expectations, provided professional learning opportunities, configured all elementary schools for Canvas for Elementary, which is a friendlier interface for younger students, and supported the teaching and learning coaches role at each of our schools. We are continuing to integrate tools like Zoom, McGraw-Hill, Mastery Connect, Nearpod, and sharpen our Canvas design conventions by learning from courses provided through Ignite Online Academy and Ignite Next courses. We have developed the Canvas design conventions and standard, which provide consistency for our students. In addition, we have provided professional learning around the ISTE, which stands for International Society for Teaching and Education, Technology in Education, standards for students through their digital learning and learning coaches. Our digital learning and teaching coaches help teachers integrate technology in the classroom to enhance learning opportunities for all students. At this time, I will turn it back over to Dr. Hardy.
Thank you, Ms. Malone. I think I forgot someone, and I apologize. I would like to also acknowledge Dr. Al Royster, Executive Director for Research and Accountability. In closing, we would like to thank the members of our team. Would also like to acknowledge that student achievement lives at the school level with our teachers and our school-based leaders and our academic support staff. I would like to thank them for their work with our children every day and for truly bringing this work alive in our classrooms each day. As part of our continuous improvement and learning, departments within the academic office have had the opportunity to participate in conferences and webinars over the past year. In these conferences, there often is a focus on recovering from learning loss. Some of the promising practices that have been shared include acceleration, an intentional focus on specific subgroups such as ELs, students with disabilities, and students of color, providing a safe learning environment, which you will hear and we will discuss more about in December when we provide a priority 2 board update, access to high quality instructional materials, and regular progress monitoring of academic performance, as well as parent and family engagement. Some of the key accomplishments you have been able to hear about, such as our Panorama Data Dashboard, professional learning in the areas to support students of color and specific subgroups, core curricula adoption with the help of this board, and regular monitoring of student progress serve as evidence of implementation of some of these promising practices to help accelerate learning for each and every young person and our DPS students every day. This time, I'll turn it back over to Board Member Rogers for questions and discussion.
Anybody have any questions? Ms. Umstead.
Thank you all so much for this presentation and everything you all do in your work. I really appreciate also the acknowledgement of our teachers and educators and principals, right? And I use educators because that's every person in the building, from our IT techs to our school nutrition, all those folks. So I really appreciate the accomplishments, and I think the ways that y'all have pivoted to as we are recovering from the pandemic. I did have a statement and then some questions around 1C. The first strategy is around identifying barriers that address Black, or that are preventing some of our Black and Hispanic or Latinx males and females from succeeding. I wanted to know if we were able to identify some of those barriers, if y'all could speak to what those might be, what specific interventions we're doing. That's the first part of my question. I'll save the second part for after that.
And I think Dr. Maddox Perry and Dr. Bullock can come up. I will say, even just yesterday, we were having a conversation with our high school principals about especially some of our males that are needing to work during the day and really wanting to make sure that they have the opportunity to recover credits. And so Evening Academy is really a specific strategy that we have not only used in the past, but are actually refining to make sure that it is more intentional for groups of students, specifically some of our Latinx males, where we know that that is going to be an opportunity, hearing directly from our principals yesterday. And they're both right there ready.
Actually, Dr. Hardy took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was going to speak to in terms of just thinking about the different educational opportunities we have for some of our students who may be off cohort, that we're trying to support them in gaining credits that they may have missed. And tools or resources like Evening Academy have been instrumental in helping people to regain those credits and get closer to cohort, if not on cohort, and graduating within 4 years. So those are just that flexibility with scheduling has sometimes been an opportunity that students need. And if we have students kind of stuck in certain structures where they have to take classes at certain times or things of that nature, that structure has sometimes been a barrier for them being able to catch back up, get on cohort, or to maximize their time in schools. So that was the first thing that came to mind for me, Dr. Maddox Perry.
The only thing I would add is that we've also been identified that a barrier is for many students is the 9th grade and getting a good start in the beginning. So one thing that we've been trying to increase, and curriculum and instruction has been really good at doing this, is 8th grade credits that could be taken taking credits in 8th grade that could be used for high school credits. We know that we need to get students promoted from 9th grade as quickly as possible. And that leads to higher graduation rates more than almost any other strategy. And sometimes when you may have a turbulent ninth grade or something happening, if you've got some credits, that can be something like a safety net that can help increase your success.
One more thing I will add is the addition of programs like, for example, at Southern with the skilled trades pathway. Programs like that have also been shown to be beneficial for students who, are looking for ways to possibly get like licensure or things that are going to help them into the workforce. So those have also been some programs that have helped with our cohort graduation rate.
Yes, y'all can stay up here. I have one on the second part. I think both of your answers though are lined up to my second part, because my second piece was, are there systems change that we need to be doing to better support some of our students? And I know when we changed the schedule for high school to be later, that decision was based on research, but I worry because I know some kids who sometimes might skip out on that fourth period because they're going to work. And that 3 to 7 or 3 to 9 work range works really well for them. They're supporting their families. And so I'm not saying we need to change that today. I know that's a big decision, but I wonder, as y'all are learning and doing more, if there are other things that we need to be thinking about on a systems level to support students towards graduation. Please don't hesitate to bring that so we can start thinking through what that looks like. Because again, we can do this one, and you all are supporting individuals, but there might be something we need to do system-wide.
And I just want to add on to this question because it's along the same lines of what I was thinking as well. So when you ask the questions, yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. What are the barriers that have been identified and what systems can be in place? So when I hear you, Dr. Maddox Perry, talk about the courses that could be taken in 8th grade to get credit, the first one I think about is Math 1, but not everybody's on track to take Math 1 by 8th grade. So I'm wondering, what are those courses that could be considered, and what systems are in place for our middle schools to get students to take credit-ready courses that are eligible for credit. That's really not hard to get into, but you know what I'm saying? Not as hard as Math 1, I would think.
So we have Math 1 in our middle schools. We also have opportunities for Math 2, and in exceptional circumstances, Math 3, and for middle school students. So those are all possibilities. English 1 is another course that we offer in our middle schools. And this year we are piloting Earth and Environmental Science as an option at Rogers Horror. And so that is underway now. And we hope to expand that.
We've also as part of our robust summer programming, provided acceleration opportunities over the summer for some of our students. So not only opportunities and courses in the middle school, but courses in the summer so that they are even better prepared when they get to high school. And so that was part of the summer learning that we shared with you. It's actually this year, but it was in the spring that there were opportunities for first-time credit. That credit by demonstrated mastery. So that's in it. That's something else, but we did have first-time credit as well as part of our summer learning.
I just thought of one more thing. There are opportunities for students to take courses through the North Carolina Virtual School as well and get credit in that way.
And it makes me think too, when we looked at data, Math 1 was one of some of the lowest areas. That's 9th grade. How do we build kids up in 8th grade? Is summer learning also 8th grade math camp? Doesn't sound exciting. We could think about some other names for that, so that though when they start 9th grade, they're in a better position to get out of Math 1, right? So all that stuff is correlated. And y'all probably already thinking about this, makes me think about how do we get 8th grade counselors ready for getting you into skills pathway, or you're interested in culinary, let me help you already get you into that pathway starting in 8th grade, so that they're already connected and hooked in 9th grade versus later. So anyway, that's all the things I thought about, was thinking about, and how do we get systems change work? The other comment I had is just, I would love more data in these presentations. I think I said that last time. How many students have we caught with the early indicator? How many have exited that? How many students or educators have been through the certain training? I would just love to have a little more numbers on that. Thank you all.
Ms. Chavez.
I have a question around this same topic. So Maybe don't sit down yet. Thank you. But I just, appreciate the conversation on this. And I was wondering if you could share what opportunities Black and Latino male students have for mentorship by Black and Latino adult males at this time. I know some of it happens informally, but I was just wondering if, you could share a little bit about, and also I recognize that it's, that's an area where it's hard to recruit both, Black and Latino male teachers, but I wanted to see if you could just share a little bit about what you are observing right now.
Thank you for that question. That also reminds me of one of the things that our principals have spoken about in terms of helping to support the boost in graduation rate, particularly that we saw in 2021, was our principals who were able to bring on bilingual counselors and bilingual staff to support in building relationships and learning more about the barriers that students were facing and ways to, dismantle those barriers to help them get to graduation. In terms of, so that makes me think of mentoring, but specifically, as you may be aware, we have the We Are Kings, We Are Queens programs in several schools at this point. I think last year we had about 60 programs. And in those programs, the target audience for those are our boys and girls of color. And so with that, we have a full curriculum design for K-12 to support students in identity affirmation, but also to support them academically with tutoring supports, things of that nature. So those programs have proven to be extremely successful. We have a draft of an impact report that we have developed on, just how beneficial those programs have been that we're planning to share very soon. We're still working on our final tweaks with that. So with that, we have seen some great opportunities with mentoring, and we're looking for ways of expanding that. And also we have new people coming on board who have ideas of ways that they can support it also. And if that doesn't answer your question, please feel free to share it again, and I'll see if I can address it more directly.
That's a little bit of a preview to a future work session item. As Dr. Mabingo works with the chair and the vice chair, we do have some updates in the area of equity affairs that we would like to share with the board.
Awesome. We'll look forward to that. Thank you. That answers it.
So Mr. Sears has some follow-up. I have a question, Ms. Lewis, and I'll go last, but Ms. Lewis and Ms. Valadares.
So I think this is largely for you, Dr. Mbenga. Something that I would like to see related to the two metrics that are in this presentation is some peer district data to help us better see how we're doing. This is a great presentation showing us how we're doing against our own benchmarks. And we operate in an ecosystem of education with peers that have similar poverty levels, similar sizes. And it would help us, I think, do our job, holding the administration accountable to high standards, if we could see how we're doing district to district. So I don't need a response on that tonight, but if you could send us some of that data, that would be helpful.
I completely agree, Mr. Sears. That's a good observation. And this is going to be a follow-up. I'm going to work with staff to be able to be very transparent when it comes to data, how we compare to other district. But I also wanted to make a general comment regarding the strategies that were presented here. It's not comprehensive. There are other strategies that we are using that were not listed here. And I don't want to give our board and our community false hope that our students will be getting credit from high school. Just wanted to be transparent with that. To be in Math 1 or English 1 is really demanding. You have to meet those prerequisites. But what is really essential, as we all know, when you get to high school, you can get up to 8 credit every year. Multiply by 4, that's 32. And our students only need 28 credits to be able to graduate. I think we're going to work really hard, making sure that our core instructions is working really well, and then try to catch up those students during the summer, the ones that are really behind, so they can be ready, especially those 8th graders, uprising 9th graders to be ready. But there are also 2 other strategies that are really important to the question regarding our student of color. When it comes to our Latinx, I think we are really beefing up our strategies, how to be able to have a robust parent engagement. That's really important because they are really critical when it comes to the achievement or the graduation of our students. And also another strategy when it comes especially to our student of color that we have not tapped into is to look at sports and be able to look at those mentors, those athletic directors and those coaches. If our students are not really achieving the way they're supposed to, there should be some study skills before the practice and all that kind of stuff. And those students will be able to listen to their coaches. And I think that's another strategy that can also be implemented to make sure that our students of color they're really excelling. So all we presented today, those are the strategies that we have in place, but we also have our schools, they have their own strategies as well. They're implementing to get our students where they need to be. I just wanted to give that comprehensive response. But to Mr. Sears, definitely we're gonna bring data so that we all can be in that place that we're seeing how we're comparing with other districts.
Ms. Lewis, Ms. Valadares, Ms. Byer.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Again, very well received as well. Thank you for acknowledging our educators and all the hard work that's happening to recover from COVID and the learning loss. And Dr. Hardy, thank you for also including just the awareness of the practices, the conferences that you all are attending to get the best practices and aligning to show that we are doing those things, implementing those in those places. I have just a few questions and a recommendation. Board Member Chavez and I were at an event at NCCU for the pinning ceremony for the Marathon Teaching Institute, which is a pipeline of supporting Black male educators that are coming through NCCU. Dr. Bullock was there, Dr. Lasang was there as well. Dr. Lasang was recruiting as best as she could while they're still in school. But as we think about the mentors, a question that Board Member Chavez asked earlier, as we think about mentors, I would be curious to know if we can get some of those guys to mentor now, being part of We Are Kings, if that's an option. I'm sure you're already thinking about how to plug them in if they're not already plugged in, Dr. Bullock. So that just made me think of that when you asked about the mentors and what we're doing. And it was just a really fabulous program, only in its 3rd year, and just trying to support Black male educators in this pipeline that we've talked about. It's really good to see that we're focusing on our metrics from the strategic planning. We have direction to know that we're at 90%, getting to that 90% of exceeding growth. That's really what's most important. We want to grow our kids, right? It is still disappointing to see that we're at a 44% proficiency rate. We want to get that up and get that over. So one of the questions I have is around, we talked about with ESSER funds before and looking at doing Saturday academies. Is that still part of the plan where we are now?
We're starting this Friday with all the Math 1 students. We have up to 150 students that will be attending Northern High School, Hillside, and Riverside. And we're able to pair those students with students that have proven data from other district to be able to reach out to those students. Teachers will be well compensated, and students will be getting serious incentives. And they're really excited to be there as well. So we're starting with Math 1, and then I know my staff, they're working with other subject areas so that we'll be able to bring those students. I think we're starting this Saturday, and we are really excited for that opportunity.
Thank you so much. Also, the last thing I'll say, I just appreciate seeing the different dashboards that are coming to be the panorama dashboard, the dashboard for early warning systems, and also wanted to commend the work happening with IT. Congratulations on technology adoptions, really moving us into the 21st century and beyond with the education professional training that's happening as well. So thank you for your report. Thank you for all the hard work that you all are doing. And again, just keeping the commitments that we made. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I echo gratitude for the work that is happening in the early warning system. Dr. Hardy, you met with us prior to this board meeting. We had really rich discussions and we were talking about the holistic approach, how our students don't just show up to learn isolated from context. One of the context, something that we as a district need to be very receptive to is the context of this engagement that is happening, not with one student, not an individual, but more of like an entire classroom. If we have more than 50% of students in that class performing with these and you know, not showing proficiency and all that, like what supports do we have for those educators who are doing their best to engage their students, but are finding that maybe there's some factors, right? And what kind of supports? And I think the mentorship is one piece, but then there's also, as we know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like how are we ensuring, is it about nutrition? Is it that these children are not having adequate lunch? You know, what is happening in terms of screening for MTSS, starting an MTSS process with them. And I know that we already have systems in place that will identify a particular student, but I'm also looking at contextual things. How are we looking at the classroom space, the management, any supports, you know, do we need to have more instructional assistants helping us in certain classrooms? Just all the layers of support, because I think that one of the things that I am seeing is that children, again, you know, a lot of these dynamics don't happen individually. They happen within a context of what their peers are doing, what are some patterns. And so I'd like for us to continue to watch and continue those conversations that we had about our early warning system and how it gets developed, how it's not just looking at the one student, but also are we having Title I schools that have many classrooms that are also showing exhibiting just that need of more supports. The other thing for me is that as we are talking about the just the data and more of the options that we have for students and how we're preparing them early, we continue to work with CT. I'm so glad to see Dr. Julie Pack always, anytime, because I think that is definitely work that is happening in terms of students knowing their options, whether they want to go into a trade, whether they want to go into college. Some of our students want to serve our country. So JROTC programs and those avenues. And I think that more of those stories of how they can see themselves represented. I love what our, team is doing in terms of featuring alumni and showing the different paths. And we need to continue to let them see themselves in these different paths. At the end of the day, it's not just one singular path, but we're offering just ways that our students can connect to just the different ways of being successful and going out and having productive lives. And so I just want us to continue to connect these things, to, connect the content, kind of like core knowledge content that we connect, and that I know has been really instrumental in many schools where they talk about the math that is in sports, right? Talk about the math that is, helping students design things, talk about the math that is helping even chefs, do their measure, create the perfect recipe and, entrepreneurship and so many different things. So to continue to show those stories, but also like connect those with these basic core knowledge things that we're doing. So just a lot of support, a lot of gratitude. And I also echo that I'd like to see more of this work developed into the holistic approach that we have to support our students.
I just want to join the chorus of gratitude from my colleagues, but there's a reason this is priority one in this strategic plan. This is where everything starts, and this is where we all get grilled the most. And you all know that, you live it. I echo the call for kind of deeper data going forward. One thing that occurred to me is, Dr. Mingo, we do have the 22 credit diploma, and we need some data on how often that's being used. My fear when we put that in place was we overused it, and I never want us to not maximize the mastery of content that we get into our students. And I don't want us to rely on that too heavily while we're working to increase graduation rate. And so kind of data on that, data on being frank that credit recovery isn't the quality that we want children to have, if at all possible. Like it's a credit recovery, but it's not the intense like mastery kind of level excellence in content that we want for our students. So making sure that as much as possible, we are getting these kids ready for their future. So data on if we get 90% of them graduating, are 90% of them able to be admitted into Durham Tech, or are, how many of them are able to get into a UNC system school? Like that next indicator and that next data tracking, kind of looking at, are they ready? And I know y'all are thinking deeply about these things. And then I think we've done an amazing job marketing and we really upped social media and that use. But I had to dig to find where I could find information on our website about Evening Academy just now. And that should be easy for folks to find if we really think it's a strategy for our boys of color. Like that. And what else was I looking for? CTE pathways. I think we need to brag about those a whole lot more. We do it every time we have the culinary students here, but there are so many reasons that there's a variety of pathways and people still aren't aware. So I look forward to ways that we can continue to kind of celebrate that and lift that up. Dr. Hardy, I'm gonna ask you, can you remember that software that people got upset about us changing that I can't remember the name of this year? IT wise, there was something that they used to like. Somebody, Land School. Yeah, just because IT's on here and we talk about I'd asked in the future that we have a talk about how we're going to refresh and keep up with their needs, since we're going towards 100% and they are going to need more and more. And we can't even get the projector bulbs sometimes for them, which drives them nuts, right? But that one specifically, that piece of software, they had some, and I thought it was more yours than, yeah.
It was Land School's a monitoring software, and either I think Ms. Malone or Dr. Gurian can speak to that. If you remember, we did initiate that when we were completely remote to make sure that we had the availability from our teachers to make sure that our students were fully connected. Now that we are back fully in person and there is an integrated hybrid approach, we want to make sure that, just as 1D says, using technology as a tool, we want to make sure that in the classroom, they are using that as a tool to access resources, maybe even engage in discussions with their students, submit assignments, but it is not the only tool. So there is this expectation regarding how teachers are monitoring within the classroom. And that is a tool that the district has not district-wide supported, since we are back now fully 100% in person. And teachers and students do have the opportunity, remember, again, to use that device as a tool, not as the only mode for learning, which is what we had to do when we were 100% remote. And I don't know if
And was that,
yes, it does.
was it expensive? Is that the reason that we made a change?
That is another reason, and Dr. Mavinga prompted me to say that as well, that it does have an expensive cost as well. Ms. Malone or Dr. Tagurian, if you want to add.
Yep. So during the pandemic, so there was a kind of incentive to have Land School from a kind of free perspective. But in analyzing it and getting ready to have to renew that contract and there being a cost associated, we looked at the usage of the tool during the pandemic. So how many teachers were actually using the tool? How are they going in to observe kind of the things that were going on in the student devices? Also, there were some security issues. So that product had some ways where our students could go into the back end and change some of the settings and do different things there. So based on that, we did not renew it from a district perspective. We did communicate out to our schools that we have vetted 3 other products in which they can use at the school level. And so we've communicated that out to our principals in Leadership Weekly. 2 of those, I know, Dino, which was actually already being used in Ignite Online Academy. Yep, NetOpt. And then there's one that is actually being piloted right now called Go Guardian. So those are the 3 products currently vetted through curriculum and instruction that are available for our schools to purchase.
That's great. It seemed like just online that maybe they weren't all the way aware of those new options, and maybe there'll be PD about that in the future, because a lot of the chatter seemed to be folks didn't even know it was there. And then once they heard the functionality from their peers, they were like, I would have loved that. So maybe there's some opportunity, maybe there's to educate going forward.
And I
Thank
think, sorry, I think I would say the feature that they're most interested in is being able to push out a particular link to younger kids and not have to go to each device and make sure they're at the right place. Because if the link is long or shortened like a bit.ly, that's difficult for kindergartners and first graders to get correct.
Thank you so much for that feedback.
Just as a follow-up, and Dr. Hardy, I think we've talked about this, but I just wanted to know if there was any analysis of dead spots. We have heard that there's, in terms of equity, every classroom having all the tools and especially the technology, right? Like every educator having access to technology to do instruction, every student having access to that. And I know that we have multi-factor authentication, which is something that keeps us, free of hacks and attacks and all that. But when it comes to how we're working to identify, what is the process if an educator is constantly having issues, maybe getting the authentication, the MFA, I know they would call IT, but do we have a way to keep track of what those work orders or requests are? And where are we having most of those dead spots throughout the whole district?
And yes, and I know Ms. Malone can definitely speak. We monitor those tickets very, very carefully to make sure that we are seeing any trends. How do we need to respond to those? Just a clarifying question. When you're talking about dead spots, are you talking specifically in maybe a school area? So in a classroom might be experiencing that, or are you talking more when we're at home and in particular areas of the Durham community, or it's both? Okay.
I have heard that there are particular like school buildings, like there are certain areas in the building that are not as that don't seem to have the same signal strength. And so they're not able to access the materials, the tools, technology consistently. And so it's affecting the learning environment for students.
Okay.
So Ms. Valladares, to address that question, and I did hear that at one of the previous board meetings and provided some context around that. So again, as we have our educators or even our students, if they have a mobile device, so that if that's a non-DPS device, again, it could be Verizon, Sprint, AT&T, that cell coverage in our buildings may vary. And so we don't have that vendor or they provide cell service in our building. We do have wireless access, and we have that for mobile devices as well as personal devices to get on our network with different secure passwords. And so what we have is we have go out and do assessments to make sure that we have coverage in our buildings. If any of our students or staff find that they cannot get onto our Wi-Fi network, they should submit a request to IT support. We do monitor those tickets. We can go out. If we don't have the technology, we can send a vendor out there to get that technology assessed to make sure that if it's adding an access spot or if it's tuning some of those configurations, we can get that done.
Can I piggyback? Just, you hit a nerve. If you're ever in a meeting with Verizon, it infuriates me that we can be at a very large middle school, Lucas, and have no signal. Like, this is Durham, the city of medicine, R1 universities. We ought to have cell coverage across the county. Like, thank you for
I
that.
agree.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for the presentation. Most of my questions have already been asked, but I do have some short follow-ups. The first thing would be just really kind of confirming that when we talk about graduation cohorts and getting to that 90%, we're making sure that our students are graduating career and college ready and not sacrificing their ability to present and demonstrate that they can be successful in life after high school as we go forward. I do have a question about, as they move forward, I'm sorry. I do have a question about the 4-year plan in high school, which is great for freshmen this year or last year, whenever it was started. Is there something that we're doing now to help with sophomores and juniors and seniors to get them to that place? Whether it's using Zillow or a shorter plan, and that our counselors are prepared for that. Yeah, I'll start with that, I guess, whoever wants to answer.
So for many years, it has been the expectation that we have 4-year plans for students as they arrive to high school. We have just increased, as you've said, over the years, not only our monitoring of that, but also our vertical alignment, so that some of that planning does begin in the middle school. And the middle school and high school counselors are now working as a PLC at different times of the year to make sure that they are sharing practices around how they're creating those plans. And there's high accountability for yearly and within a year monitoring progress on those plans. So that's where every conversation with a student and about a student begins for many of our student support services staff in the school.
Before Dr. Pack jump in, I know we've been doing some work with Durham Tech. You attended those meetings as well. So we have a plan. JB Baxton will be meeting with him tomorrow as well to see how we can increase our graduate up to 20% of our students graduating with an associate degree, as well as those credentials. If we're talking about those students graduating ready for career, I think that would be a good point for you to be able to highlight that.
Yes. So there are a lot of options for students and looking at the 4-year plan. And as they've matriculated, the options have expanded. As Dr. Mbinga talked about, we're really focusing on our students graduating with a degree, a diploma, and or a credential, right? And that's the work that we're doing with Durham Tech. We're also collaborating across CTE and student services. So our CDCs, our career development coordinators, and our school counselors are working along the career trajectory together and helping students make that pathway. So what do you want to do after you leave school? Let's figure out what the next steps are. Some of that is formalized in Zello and held in Zello, and they can use that to then, the platform itself is online and they can take what they want to do. They can find education options along the lines of, as well as job options. So it's a multifunctional tool.
Thank you. And in the presentation, you all also talked about having the earlier meetings with the students and the counselors and the parents. Are we tracking how often we're having these conversations with students and counselors and parents? I'm a strong advocate for parent engagement, but we know sometimes it's hard for parents to be engaged. And we also know that it's important to get a mentor, somebody to advocate for the student in that space in the stead of the parent, if the parent's not responsive after a while or unable to attend for whatever reason. Are we tracking those things so we know when to bring folks in?
I'll say that work is pretty much done at the school level. Every school, they have the way they set up those meetings, whether or not they bring a cluster meetings with all the counselors or principals being involved. I don't know if anyone in the central office have that data, so.
I do, just to add and to what Dr. Mbinga said, the parent engagement, we know that that is parent and family engagement is a critical piece in not only accelerating learning, but really making sure that that communication, so that's ongoing work that we're having, not only at the central service level, but really making sure that that's happening at the school level. Our Title I schools, that's a component of their Title I plans. It's also a component that you'll hear in the next few minutes from Dr. Stewart as part of our school improvement planning process and school improvement plans. And what you heard today about the data dashboard and early warning system, that we know is also going to be an opportunity for us to quickly identify some of those groups. And then principals and teachers can use those to also help. There is an expectation that during the first quarter, all of our elementary school families have a parent-teacher conference. And then our principals and supervisors monitor that conference to make them aware of the progress of those young people.
Thank you. And so many people have loved on the We Are Kings and We Are Queens program. I want to ask if we could add an element of mentorship where we have high school students coming and having breakfast with the middle school and elementary students and talking about how that work is continued all through their trajectory within DPS. Thanks.
So we are really excited about the work that we are doing. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead first.
I was just gonna say, yes, we can definitely look into our options for, connecting some mentors from the high school level to the younger grades. We have had some success with that in the past. And so, but there's a great opportunity to make it more systemic. So we've had those connections, particularly with some of our Queens programs. I remember some of the Queens from one of our high schools or middle schools went to our elementary schools and they built some relationships there. But there's a lot of potential there that we could work on realizing.
And tell us what you need.
I will.
Pretty much I wanted to say we are really excited about the work that we are doing. I think all the strategies that we presented, we're giving our families hope that we're in the right trajectory. But I also wanted to bring this up. As we're looking at those vacancies, I think we are seriously concerned about EC. I had a meeting today with Dr. Bell. I mean, we're putting money out there, $7,000 to recruit EC facilitators and all that. We're not funding anyone when it comes to those vacancies. We're working really hard. We're having an opportunity to go to ECU, meeting with our dean, bringing all these students when they're coming for the clinical and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of these universities around here, they're not producing enough EC. As our population, somewhere around 14-15%, we are struggling in that area. I don't want to give all the false hope here, but we are really excited. We're doing really great work. But EC area is really a challenging area for us when it comes to staffing.
Dr. Minga, you reminded me that these vacancies district-wide are impacting all of this priority one. I mean, I had a great conversation with a parent of an elementary student who has an IA that has stepped up to fill a classroom role, but they would be the first to admit they're not as ready as they want to be, right? And so it's not just EC and it's not just science and it's just not just math. And to see these vacancies nationally and not to have a systemic change that we need and that these students deserve is heartbreaking. I mean, and we can't just rely on stealing teachers from nearby districts. They need them too, right? So
Ms. Blair, I might ask that we consider adding that to our legislative agenda. This is not about progressive communities versus conservative ones. Everybody needs EC teachers. Just like when we're not getting CDLs processed fast enough, we need to go to our state partners and say, come on, like, let's get past this and get some help. So I'll leave it at that.
And I wonder if we have our current IA to instructional assistant to teacher program, if we reserve some of those spots for EC IAs, who can become teachers, who hopefully maybe can become facilitators, because I think that might need to be an intentional pathway. And if we do some recruitment, maybe at Durham Tech, folks already got 2 years worth of a degree to help get into a pathway. And yeah, I'm trying to think a little long term. People who got 2 years who might be a great IA and can move into a teacher position or facilitator.
These are some really great options. And just again, it's systemic. And when we're looking at system, what do we need to do with the system? And I think for Durham and all the millions of people who are watching right now, part of that system is our community, our churches, our volunteers, our families. And like, we have to really pull together because our schools are suffering. And I know that our educators are doing the best that we can. I know that we have a plan coming forth about what this engagement looks like, and everyone's is pulled and at odds and at capacity, right? But if we really want the best for our children and their future, we have to pull together as a community. So I just want to appeal as well, legislative, educators, and being able to move things around, and also our community to step forward, and us to make it easy for us community to step forward and have these partnerships in place.
Ms. Alderman.
Dr. Mubenga and our administration, I'm really, really grateful that you met with JB Buxton from Durham Tech. I do know that we have such a great ally in this work of creating. I mean, I also have heard from him that he's creating certification programs. He's helping, create, like, go out of the box and figure out what are the specific needs. If we have, I think what would be helpful when I talk to community members who have in a past life, not past life, but like literally like they moved from another country here and have had, teaching experience. And then we're trying to figure out like, how do they pair up, right, with the requirements. Those are conversations we need all hands on deck. And there are a lot of programs like Participate Learning and we can do stopgap solutions and hire visa, get some educators with visas, but we also need to continue to build those pipelines. And so I commend you on being interactive and meeting with our ally up the street, who's definitely like very much interested in collaborating with us, and then figuring out what certifications, what else do we need? When it comes to EC, what are those steps to continue to create those pipelines? Because we can't have 120. Is that where we're at with EC? Vacancies?
That would be all positions if we're talking about
120 all.
For all of that, but I can get
Last-
some updated numbers for you as of today.
Last meeting it was 40. Dr. Bell said 40.
That's teachers.
40 teaching positions, but we have 120 vacancies throughout, like in terms of how to serve all our students around that number. 40 EC teachers. And so, just continuing to figure out like how to leverage these partnerships. And I definitely agree with our colleagues that this is definitely, there's so many layers to it in terms of advocacy at the state level, national trends, recruitment and everything else that we're doing, but definitely leveraging our partners here in the community as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hardy. That's all our questions. Are we ready for the next agenda item, the school improvement plan?
Dr. Stewart, Chief of Schools.
Thank you all.
Good evening. Chair Umstead, Vice Chair Sears, all members of the board, and Dr. Mubenga. We are excited to finally showcase the work that has been occurring since July 1 as it relates to school improvement planning for Durham Public Schools for the 22-24 academic years. I am joined by two of my outstanding teammates, Dr. Dietrich Danner, the Senior Executive of Federal Programs and Community Engagement, and our talented Miss Ashley Stevens, Director of School Innovation. I have asked them to drive this presentation.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here tonight, and I'm excited to share this information with you. Next slide, please. Tonight, we're going to take an overview of the work that we've done thus far. The core content of our work and continuous improvement is ensuring that all of our students are successful. Our number one goal with continuous improvement is not only student success, but making sure it's aligned to the work that we're doing as a district. This year, we started off through alignment to our strategic plan and alignment to Dr. Mabenga's non-negotiables. This was a team effort. So we worked with different district staff, school faculty, staff, students, and family and community partners. Our schools did the work by starting by looking at a variety of data resources. This does not just include student learning. They also looked at data sources that include perception data, demographic data, and school processes data. After their initial work, schools presented to the Office of Chief of Schools, including principal supervisors and other key central services personnel, including curriculum and instruction, student support services, exceptional children, English as a second language, and equity and professional learning. Our schools were able to create their school improvement plan and then present this presentation. On the next slide, we have prepared a video for you that is a summation of the work that we have completed this far. Next slide, please.
A few years ago, I stood in this room and shared with board members that we were working towards a continuous school improvement process, that the goal was to move from being compliant, checking the boxes, to being committed to the process. So I'm most excited about this opportunity for school level persons, the school improvement teams, inclusive of teachers, administrators, and parents, to come together and have authentic conversation around areas in need of improvement and their focus for this academic year.
I'm Susan Taylor, the very proud principal of C.E. Jordan High School, and we're excited to share about the school improvement process for 22-23. I'm thankful to Dr. Davis, Dr. Stewart, other cabinet leadership members for preparing us with the recipe for success. What we're most excited about is our incentive plan. We want to recognize teachers and students who are doing everything they can to ensure that all students graduate on time and with options. We have clear expectations for our community, and our students are meeting those expectations. Come join us for Homecoming 2022 Falcon Fest to see all the celebrations in action.
So just reflecting on this process in its entirety, Hillside, actually, we met as a team last year. We began the school improvement planning for the current school year, the previous school year. And so we launched this work back in the spring of 2022. And a lot of feedback from different stakeholders were taken into consideration as we chose our indicators. Those indicators are actually those focus areas that we believe will drive our work at Hillside High School. And most importantly, these are the indicators that were chosen that will help us achieve the goals that we have included in our school improvement plan.
So working with Dr. Stewart and our team with the Office of Chief of Schools, we work to put together a process that will support all schools as they work through continuous improvement. One thing that we really wanted to focus on was making sure all of our efforts supported Dr. Mabenga's non-negotiables. So every district indicator that we've worked with connects directly to a non-negotiable.
because we want to have a consistent process.
Yes.
And so that's going to be important that when we start the day, that the entire team understands how we're going to guide this process.
My goal is, again, if the school comes and I present that data, right, we ask them specifically for mission vision, school enrollment data, EOI data, and teacher attrition rate, right? Like, is there anything else we need to be able to triangulate? Because now is the time when, like you said, you'll have their Title I plan where you're going to say, wait a minute. When, you know, when we get to feedback, something's not aligning here. And as we get feedback to schools, I'll capture your papers, type it up right then and there as we're transitioning, share it with the principal, and they'll have their feedback. Darnice Massey, I'm not sure if you worked with her last year. She will be like your school improvement person.
Okay.
Because she has that really good lens on looking at budgets and human resources and those flexibilities. So she'll be reaching out to you guys to kind of just say like, I'm here for support.
Okay.
So I'll still be able to help, like you can still always ask for me, but because she has additional special projects to work on, we couldn't load her with schools. So I was like, I'd rather you work with my restart principals because they don't need the leadership coaching.
Right.
It's really like, I have this budget. When do I put money in my, 030 Piercy, 031, whatever it is. When do I use my Title I? When do I, need someone to advocate that I need some flexibility money, stuff like that. So I think that'll be a good view for her. PLCs, professional learning communities, are an important part of the improvement process. This is a time for teachers, support staff, and school leaderships to come together. They can work on things such as their intervention plan, how they will support students, school goals, teacher goals, student goals. They can also work on things like professional learning and how they will implement their family and engagement community plan.
Let's talk about PLCs. So we put these particular pieces in here again, because again, as we said, we do have our way and our Raider way. As my illustrious boss likes to say, this is our recipe, right? My recipe is never going to, or I call it a pound cake recipe. My cake is never going to taste like Dr. Jones's cake. She's an actual cook. So was my mom. But this is my recipe. And I will say that these are the things that will assist us in making sure, again, like I said, we get to that double-digit growth. I have to stand on the trophy stand. I have to be there. But here's the thing. Number one, we're setting high expectations and making sure that instruction is happening from bell to bell. And we're making sure too, that we are not only grouping students based upon the data, but then also too, that we're continuing to analyze that data within POCs. And then we're basically trying to, shift that locus of control when it comes to instruction so that we teachers are the facilitators of the learning. And it's the kids at the end of the day that are tired. Because I remember saying very constructively to a teacher last year, but I said to her when I did her summative, I said, I bet you were exhausted every day when you get home. And she said, Dr. Lydia, oh my gosh, I am. I said, I know you're working hard because I'm seeing it. I said, but that's what I want you to think about. I'm seeing it. The kids are not working as hard as you are. And that's the disconnect.
Our PLCs are really focused. They're focusing on a lot of different things, whether it is making sure the team is all on the same page, collecting really important data and actually learning what to do with that data. And then also just working on improving our literacy strategies, making sure we're up to date with what works best for students, and making sure we're all on the same page as a class in a building, so that when a kid leaves or a student leaves my classroom, they're going to get the same instruction in the next one. And I think that's been really powerful for our students. So PLCs this year have been a real plus. It's really great to just be together as a 6th grade team, talk about students, talk about the things that are working well or not.
What we're going to do today is something that you've already done. On September the 6th, if you think back, you guys, along with Beth, did your teacher data trackers, right? You set up your goal for your classrooms for cores 1, 2, 3, and 4. For discovery, you also set up your goal tracker. And then for a team, you plugged in those numbers and a number came up and that was your goal. Today, what we're going to do is go back to that student data tracker, make sure that the students that you have on your roster are indeed your students. We've done a lot of pulling in, taking out, changing around. So we need to go from core 1, 2, 3, 4, and discovery to make sure that it matches up with what's in Power School and also what's on your discovery list. Please make sure you are using your word of the week because admin, myself, the teachers are coming around asking your kids. I know one of the good things this morning was in 7th grade, a kid was like tracking down his teacher so he can give the teacher the word, the definition. He gave him an antonym, and he also gave the teacher a sentence. So he wanted that dragon dollar. So he's gonna have to come with that same energy for next week, but he did a great job. He really did.
With that in mind, y'all have solved it yourselves. Y'all know which ones are gonna be the most problematic. Y'all know what they're gonna be thinking about. I'm gonna split you guys up. Bill and LaRue and Mr. Jowers, if you want to join that group to make it even. I need y'all to figure out which one of these need to become application problems, right? So remember, we've been talking about how to intervene in the moment. So which one of these can we turn into application problems, changing the numbers, changing the names to help prepare the kids for the word problems? Ms. Johnson, Scarville, and Allen Powell, I want you guys to think about what fluency should we create, right? You can also think about which ones we already do, but what fluency should we create in order to make sure that they're getting that practice and repetition, okay? So that's what y'all are talking about. Y'all are talking about application problems. I'm gonna give you guys 7 minutes on the clock again. Try to figure out as many as you can, and what that will look like.
When I think about the school improvement planning process, I will say, in times past, it kind of like began as a process where we did it in isolation. We could do it in our offices as administrators, put the plan together because ultimately we knew it would sit idly in a binders on somebody's shelf. And there would be no questions asked about it. One of the things that I like most, and I think the vehicle that has made this process more transparent and made everybody accountable is IndaStar, NC IndaStar. Largely, it puts everything on public display. Our parents have access to it when it's posted online. They get a password and login to actually see it from a parent's perspective. Same thing with our students, same thing with our faculty, same thing with central office administration, same thing with board members. The community can see. And so we want to make sure that we put the best work that's out there. So I firmly believe from times past, NC IndaStar has really made this process one that is transparent, but most importantly, it is one that has made everybody accountable. So that we're just not frivolously just putting information out there to suggest to the public what we are supposed to be doing, but it actually communicates what our commitments are and what we're aiming to do and how we actually can garner support from everybody else to achieve the goals that we've outlined in the school improvement plan.
What are some ways that we can maintain students following the rules at this school? Incentives, recognizing students. PBIS, consistent PBIS plan, dojo points. What up? I feel like I am leading. I don't want to lead. I don't want to lead. This is a team.
We all know where we want to be and the work that's got to be put into getting there, and we're ready for that journey. And I would say that the fact that everyone is involved in the process is what makes it successful. In terms of collecting data and then looking at that data and using it to inform what we want to work on, and then thinking about what the end result is going to be and backwards planning. But it involves everyone in our school community, the parents and the staff. So it's not just something that's being led by the administrative team, but it includes everyone's voice.
It's been beneficial to be able to be a part of the school improvement team and be a teacher at the same time. It's nice to know that you can have the ability to lead and have input and make decisions and be involved in the process of making our school a better place, not only for the students, but for the staff and faculty as well.
The school improvement process for us has been very impactful. It's nice to hear the teachers, the students, the parents collaborate and talk about what needs to be improved at the school. And then we work together to come up with a plan to ensure we work towards those goals. There's some goals that we have every year, right? Like we always want to be an A school. That is going to be our goal and our determination. But to really start diving into what are the things that we do at our school that is impactful towards student learning. That is what we really dig deep into as we are doing our school improvement planning. I actually appreciate the superintendent non-negotiables this year. It allowed us to align our goals and it allowed us to create specific plans to those goals. For example, our reward and intervention plan. I'm most proud of our family engagement activities. We have a lot of those and we ensure that our families are in the loop. We communicate with them every week. They know that my staff and I have an open line of communication via email and phone. And this year we even implemented a reverse progress report so that we could help parents learn how to work with their students to check their college grades. And then those parents report those grades back to us. So we are doing a lot of innovative things at middle, college, high school.
The continuous improvement process takes everyone. Everything we do every day is a part of this process. We start with a plan. We work to make sure we all implement that plan with fidelity and consistency. And at the end of the year, we look at the progress we've made and we make any changes to that plan so that we can continue moving forward. Every day we all come to work, we're making a commitment to make schools that are great for our students and our community. And through this process, we can continuously improve them to ensure that they get the absolute best at Durham Public Schools.
We all are excited. I look forward to persons from various departments entering into buildings, doing learning walks to make sure that together we are indeed DPS.
Thank you for taking the time to watch that video. As DPS continues the continuous improvement journey, our main steps moving forward will be focusing on the monitoring and feedback. As I'm talked about in the video, that looks like continuous support and managing and updating, but also walkthroughs and working with schools. School improvement plans are a living document. So as schools work towards accelerating student success, schools are able to work through their school improvement teams to add or amend action steps that will support their need. Today, this is a snapshot in time of what that work will look like. I now introduce Dr. Danner that will highlight a little bit more about our family engagement process.
Good evening, board members. We are elated to share that all of our schools presented robust, meaningful family engagement plans beyond the minimal 4 family engagement programs during the SIP review process. Many schools highlighted how they are engaging families in student-led parent-teacher conferences, reverse progress reports, ESL, STEAM, digital learning, and SEL programming, as well as partnering with external partners to promote academic and social-emotional learning. We continue to review and monitor family engagement plans, as well as provide ongoing feedback to schools. So we are well on our way, and we are excited that even as we begin the second quarter, we are seeing community and family engagement happening in our schools.
Next slide, please. It's important that our families and communities are able to access these plans. Our plans are housed in a system called NC STAR's IndaStar, a platform provided by the state. Every school has a guest login. You can access that guest login from the school's website, and there's a comprehensive list on the district's website. To ensure access for all of our families, any family may request the support of our interpretation services to access the content in IndaStar. By the end of November, each school will have a one-pager highlighting their comprehensive plan, available in English and Spanish as well. I now turn it back over to Dr. Stacy Stewart.
Thank you all. Are there any questions?
Ms. Lewis, then Ms. Byer.
Thank you so much for this presentation, and the video was outstanding to see so many of our principals and educators at work. Just felt like bring your board member to school day. Dr. Danner, our first interaction with Durham Public Schools was around school improvement plans. And you were explaining to me the process several years ago. And to see and hear that it's not just a document that's put on the shelf, but truly a living document, to see the work and progress you all have made to increase a comprehensive team coming together to pull this document together. It's amazing work and progress being made. You mentioned the family engagement, Dr. Danner, and I know our strategy 4 speaks to family engagement. We have some benchmarks there, so I'd like to see where we've landed with those benchmarks, not today, but when we get to strategy 4, I know we're going to get an update, right, Dr. Hardy? So I just known that's coming, but it's important to write the vision and make it plain. So to me, this these school improvement plans that I see, I do like the intentionality that I've seen around our Latinx families, our Latinx students, and filling in academic gaps and accelerating education. There's a lot of specific targeting that I see happening in the plans, and again, that intentionality in doing these data walks has been super helpful. One question I have, I liken the school improvement plan to our district-wide strategic plan. And I know when we had our accreditation, one of the areas for improvement was that there was not necessarily a strong understanding or linkaging from what is our strategic planning to what's happening at the schools. And I know that was mentioned non-negotiables. Can you tell me, how do these two things line up? How are we working with the feedback we've got from this may be for you, Dr. Mabanga, but the feedback from the accreditation report to having a strategic plan and having school improvement plans? How are we getting alignment there?
Thank you for that question. I think the feedback that we're able to receive from our accreditation team, that's the reason why we came up with those non-negotiables. And with those non-negotiable, that's where we started with that. Every schools, they have that. They have a template posted in their schools. And our expectation at the district level, as they're doing their work with school improvement plan, they have to be able to communicate that with their families. And the school improvement plan is not separated from our strategic plan. Everything's pretty much aligned. As you're gonna see, they're presenting this, everything's pretty much aligned. And our hope and our expectations pretty much at the school level, as they having meetings with their families and all that, they gotta make sure that they're communicating the strategic plan as well as school improvement plan expectations to all our families. Everything is aligned.
And that was the one comment that I heard one of the educators say, is that the non-negotiables have been helpful, but I've also heard that seem like they're a barrier to people. How are we making sure that educators see this as being a help and not a barrier with the non-negotiables?
Sorry, I wanted to kind of talk about how we worked on that alignment. The non-negotiables definitely directly align back to our strategic plan, but it really focuses on the operational pieces of it. So when we think about PLCs, it's not one specific thing that's happening. Many of our strategies presented during priority 1, that's a vehicle for it to happen. So when we look at all of those specific things, yes, while focusing on making those entities very strong, all of the things that have to happen in order for those to be successful and efficient and effective is all the other work we do. So it seems like 5 things, but in order to really put those into operations is where we have the flexibilities of what works specifically for our school communities.
That's it. Thank you so much. Putting it into operations is a flexibility that I know that people are looking for. Thank you.
So I wanted to thank you all for this presentation. I wanted to also clarify, are you all expecting action like approval of these tonight, or will that come in 2 weeks? Because typically we have a chance for folks to actually get the passwords and our public to be able to go log in. Are we taking action tonight? Or are you expecting that in 2 weeks?
Action was requested.
Action has been requested, but we can hold it until November 17th, the next board meeting.
I just have a slight preference for that, just in case our families and communities have feedback that they want us to consider. That would give that some time and getting the, it's rare to have a piece of software that the state adopts that actually is user friendly. So kudos to whoever made that decision. I also appreciate y'all's video. It tells a story in such a compelling way. I'm sure it will win Oscars, things like that going forward. My other specific question is two specific questions. One, PLCs, how many of them this year are actually district PLCs and how many are school level? How many, they always just want their time at the school level. Have we given them all of them, half of them? How are y'all thinking about PLCs this year?
Based on the presentations led by the principals, 100% of our schools have school level PLCs. And that is an expectation in the non-negotiables that at least once a month, each department and or grade spans meet their PLCs. And all of our principals verify that that was indeed happening.
Great. I know they will love that and they will love like having that protected time. And then my other question is this notion of student incentives. And it's because I think some of, what guidelines do we give at the district level about some of these student incentives? I saw last year, like it's one thing to have PBIS incentives and wholesome things that all children can enjoy. Last year, I saw lots of video game consoles and like really high-end things that kind of celebrate one winner and don't have space for everyone. So what guidelines, how do y'all think about that as you're talking about that?
So when it comes to incentives, we don't give specific guidelines. We really trust the school to go to the site management, which is a school improvement, to come up with decisions. So which means teachers and all the staff around the table, they have to come up with ideas that is going to incentivize the staff and students. We did not give any specifics. All the district we did, we're able to give them funding, $20 per student. For example, Jordan High School, they get about $40,000. Go to your staff, meet as a staff, come up with a decision how you're going to spend the money.
And I'd just like to add one other thing to that. The one specification that we asked for, that these incentives for students and staff be data-driven.
So I appreciate that. I trust our people to give great feedback and make good decisions. That's, and I love incentives that every child can have a chance to participate and celebrate in and know that they're all working their hardest, right? And recovering from pandemic. So last year when I heard that some of our schools were doing one massive thing that was out of reach for everyone, it made me wonder kind of, let's think that through and let's make sure our sit teams really consider what that might feel like to be a child that worked their hardest and then didn't win. You know, yeah, some of that stuff just. So I appreciate y'all continuing to have those kind of thoughtful questions and conversations with our principal leaders and our educators as they work to use incentives in a way to lift all children. But thank you.
Ms. Umstead, Ms. Valadares.
Thank y'all for the presentation. I'm excited to see how the input and the alignment are going to work out as we look at these plans this year and for the future. One question I had is if you all could share a couple highlights as you've seen this new process roll out from like different schools, and then maybe where we still have opportunities, what you're kind of keeping your eye on as we're moving forward.
Okay, so a couple of weeks ago, once I checked the Google form soliciting feedback on this process, at that time, 31 principals had responded. And it was on a Likert scale from 1 to 5, 1 being ineffective to 5 being highly effective. And I will say probably 98% of that was highly effective. So we received a lot of anecdotal notes and comments regarding the process that it was highly effective. Initially, some of the principals noted that they were a little hesitant about the process because you know what change does. Sometimes it breeds fear. But as a result of engaging all persons, students, parents, staff, giving them a voice in the process, looking at the multiple data types, not just student learning that was mentioned earlier, but perception data, listening to what teachers have said in the teacher working condition survey, listening to student feedback from the student climate survey, any information that they received in terms of feedback from parents, utilizing it to guide the process, and being courageous to say, all things are not working. We have listened to the voices, we've heard them, and this process provoked reflection. At the end of the day, one of the slides said, you've got to utilize your end of grade, end of course data, as well as your teacher working condition data. Look at that information and share what's the impact. And so some principals were very honest and they said, it hurt, but it is forcing us to make some changes that are needed. So the feedback was very good. Moving forward, again, as noted by Ms. Stevens, we look forward to the vetted process walking through the buildings to say, at the end of the day, you said this is what you're going to do. We know that what gets monitored gets done. And so we're going to lead that process going into those buildings, into classrooms, full transparency, saying we're doing checks for highly effective implementation of what you said you were going to do based on your data and your conversations with your team.
One more follow-up question for that. Is there a place, I see the bubbles that you guys kind of laid out. Is there a place where you kind of laid out your process too? I'm a very visual person, so I heard the video, but I wonder if there's kind of like a 1, 2, 3 that makes the kind of shares how the process flows. That's a little different, or the changes, it highlights the changes that you've made this year.
Yes, there was a PowerPoint presentation that was shared with all of the principals, and it does outline everything. I think it may have been about 10 slides, but we wanted to be a little innovative and share the compilation through video. But yes, we do have that and we will share that.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate this, and I'm excited to see kind of the impact of where we go.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for the school improvement plans. I think that this is definitely something that we're supposed to do, but we're trying to scale it up, do it in ways that are intentional. There's ways that we can continue to work on that intention. One of the things is, as somebody who's sat in school improvement teams, I just remember some of the barriers with working families, the time of the school improvement teams. You have to, drive up to the school, and for a lot of families, they can't leave their work site. And as somebody who works with parents, right, I've been in meetings, literally just the benefit of those voices. So many of our families are so diverse, even within race, there's all kinds of diversity. There's all kinds of diversity with our families. And so, I've sat in meetings where families are actively working, but they're listening, and, you can see them at work, their hands are moving and but they're listening. And then they're saying, I have a question, how are we working towards hybrid models of engagement with our families? So for example, if somebody can't leave their work, but they're able to join in through Zoom, join in through Teams, whichever platform, that they can engage and that voice can be counted. And so we have representation across race, class, gender, all the different identities that are representative of our school community. how are we working to ensure that representation?
Thank you for that. I will say that some parents do Zoom in, but that isn't a system, it's not system-wide. So thank you for lifting that up. And as we compile best practices, as they relate to each of those non-negotiables that the principals presented on, we will make sure that that is part of that. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Some words that were coming to mind as I saw it again this week were just the cohesion, the support from your team, and also dialogue. You see that in the video, and I think that's so important. I was also reflecting when you were speaking just now, Dr. Stewart, about how it can be hard to let things go that we thought should work. And adopt new practices. But I appreciate the focus on data, because that tells us, so much that, we can utilize going forward. I just wanted to ask, and I know we talked a little bit about this last week, but about the ways in which we're able to facilitate conversation with our primarily Spanish-speaking parents. And if you had any just more information about that, how the schools were working to be inclusive, using the MRC to make sure to engage Latinx parents.
Yes, I would like to say, Ms. Stevens, Dr. Danner, myself, and Mr. Friedman, Pablo Friedman, we had a PLC around that conversation, and either of the two can follow up with that question.
Thank you for your feedback. So one thing we were able to work with Mr. Pablo and Mr. Freeman and MRC is, one, adding the information to our website that our families can request interpretation services for the IndaStar site. So while we're going to work to get that one-page highlighter document that will be useful for all families, we want to make sure that all families can also engage in the full IndaStar system, which at this time is not a system that allows for that translation services. So they can actually have the time to sit down and go through all of the information and ask any questions as they go through it. So we'll make sure that's included on the school improvement pages and on that one-page document.
Also, I would just like to give you all a preview of some other things that we have that will be coming up very soon in reference to additional resources that we will provide for our English learners and their families.
Soon to come will be a series of ESL academies across the district so that we can continue to boost not only a Latino achievement, but also a Black and Brown, or actually a Black achievement as well. But we want to ensure that those families are highly engaged. And so we will be planning with schools on how to operationalize that development across the district.
Thank you all for this awesome presentation, the video. I, like Ms. Lewis, got involved in the school improvement process and have been a school improvement team junkie. And so I'm really grateful to see all of this way. And I'm ecstatic that we are waiting to get feedback from the community in regards to the school improvement plans before we take action on it. I want to ask two things. One is if we can get a call out to families to check their school improvement team in IndaStar and telling them how to do that. And when the one-pagers are ready, for principals to include that information in whatever the communication technique they use with their families, to let them know the one-pager is there and they can access that on the school level, because it's important that we're pulling in families to engage in that process, because so many people don't know these plans exist and the importance of those plans. So we're not just assessing students, but we're making sure we're providing the best service to our families through our school improvement plans.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Chavez.
I appreciate all of that work. It's, it's amazing when people are able to communicate. It's simple, but really appreciate the work of our district to bridge that. And so I wanted to just take it a little step further, and this may be embedded in what you already were saying. But I just wanted to ask that school improvement teams be made aware that they can use the MRC to invite Latinx parents or Spanish speaking parents to participate in the team as well. I appreciate the increase the access of the plans themselves, but I just wanted to also put that in there so that they can have those cross linguistic dialogues in the actual planning teams. Again, that might have been sort of embedded in what you were saying, but I just wanted to add that point. Thank you so much.
Thank you. One of the expectations is that the parent representation on the school improvement team is reflective of the student demographics. But thank you for lifting that up, and we'll make sure we reiterate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. The next item on our agenda is the summary of follow-up items. I'm sorry, there was an addition, the superintendent form, evaluation form.
Thank you, Board Member Rogers, for passing that off. I just want to give the board a quick update. We have used the superintendent's evaluation form and process for the last several years. I wanted to think about, is that the same form? Is that the right process? As we also are doing this new strategic plan and updating that, do we want them to align maybe differently? So I spoke to Ron Malone, our attorney, to ask him to get us started in this process of thinking about what does that form look like. And so I just wanted to make sure the board was informed that we're going to get started with that, and wanted to make sure that there's any questions. Or Rod, did you have anything else to add?
No, I'll be reaching out to board members individually or in small groups to work through that process and then to bring something to the board to consider at some point soon.
So question, Rod, like, I know in the past, a lot of districts use the McCrell cookie cutter, like, tool. Are you going to bring that one to us? Are you going to bring our existing one? What are you thinking will lead us to a Durham instrument that we come to terms on?
We have had boards of late asking about different tools, and we've probably identified that we just kind of found maybe 6 or 7. My thought was to get those in your hands, and then we can pick and choose from what you like and don't like and try to come up with something that's probably Durham specific. I doubt that we'll find anyone out there that kind of meets your needs, but some version of all of them will probably get us something that aligns with what you've got in mind. That's my thought right now.
No, that's great. I'm glad you have 6 or 7 or 8, because I can't tell you how much I dislike the McCrell as like the very bland kind of, ugh. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Excuse me, that was just for an update. We do not want anyone to think that we are doing something different with Dr. Mabinga. We appreciate him and his leadership here. We just want to make sure that tool is capturing what we need for Durham. That was it. Thank you.
Thanks. Now we'll go to the summary of follow-up.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm going to start with the strategic plan priority 1 update. One of the things that the board asked us to follow up on was a system level to support our Black and Hispanic students. Want to know what we can do at a systems level to do that. Would like to see more data in the presentation that demonstrates how the different initiatives that we've undertaken are performing. Would like to see how peer districts data looks compared to ours, as well as what can we do to support our educators who may be having a little bit of trouble with some of their students achieving. We also were asked to provide data on the 22 credit diploma and how that's performing, as well as data on college and career readiness. We were asked to update the website to be more accessible to families so they're able to easily find the different programs that we're offering. And adding district-wide staffing shortages to the legislative agenda. School improvement plan. There was a question about where we had landed on priority 4 of our strategic plan based on the work that we're doing with our school improvement plan. So how is, in which we'll provide an update here soon about how we're performing in that area of the strategic plan based off of what our schools have prepared. We're gonna do the adoption of the school improvement plan on the November 17th meeting as opposed to tonight. We were asked to, at a district level, to discuss the best incentives for students and how we can make more students eligible for those incentives. The board asked that staff share the school improvement plan process slides that were shared with principals with the Board of Education. There was a call for us to make sure that we're reaching out to families and that they know to check InterStar and review the school improvement plan prior to the November 17th adoption. And then we want to make sure that our schools and our families are aware that the MRC is available to support development of and understanding of the school improvement plan. And that's the summary that I have. I did that off the top of my head and I got to write it down.
Thank you.
I move that we go into closed session for the reasons stated on the agenda.
And second.
Been moved by Ms. Umstead, second by Ms. Valadares to go in closed session. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? We're now in closed session. We're now back in open session. Dr. Mabanga.
Madam Chair, I'm here to seek for your approval for the personnel report as discussed at the closed session.
Move approval of the personnel report dated November 3rd, 2022.
A second.
It's been moved by Ms. Byer to approve the personnel report dated November 3rd, 2022, seconded by Ms. Umstead. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We're now adjourned.